She wants a trust test before our wedding. Turns out she's testing how stupid I am. Then came back pregnant, demanding I take responsibility. The court's ruling made her collapse. All right, Reddit, here's something I need to get off my chest. The day your partner sits you down with a serious face and says they want to propose a trust test, don't think twice. Don't analyze it. Get up and walk out the door. Because what comes after is never good. I'm telling you this from experience. Because that's exactly how I discovered who my ex-fiancé really was. I, 28 male, work in logistics for a distribution company here in Illinois. Been at it for 6 years, got my own place, drive a decent Ford F-150 that's actually paid off, and had my life pretty much on track. Nothing fancy, but stable and comfortable. The truck was my first major purchase after college. Bought it used from some guy who barely drove it. Thing had 35,000 miles and a maintenance record cleaner than my credit score. Spent my first weekend installing a bed liner and upgrading the speakers because the stock ones sounded like they were dying. Added a tonneau cover a month later because I'm not about leaving tools visible in the bed for anyone to grab. Work was solid too. Started as a warehouse coordinator right out of college and worked my way up to logistics manager. Spent my days coordinating shipments across 3 states, managing inventory. Not the most exciting job, but it paid well and had decent benefits. Got my own office with windows instead of being stuck in a cubicle farm. Me and Natalie had been together almost 4 years. We'd been living together for 2 of those years, in a decent 2-bedroom apartment near downtown. Got engaged about 6 months before everything went sideways, and both our families were genuinely happy about it. My parents loved her. Her parents treated me like family. We had the whole future mapped out. We hadn't locked down a wedding date yet because we wanted to save up properly and do it right without drowning in debt. Had a joint savings account specifically for wedding expenses, both of us contributing $500 a month like clockwork. Had about 12 grand saved up at that point. Figured we'd hit 25,000 before pulling the trigger on booking venues and all that. Our apartment was one of those newer developments with granite countertops and stainless appliances. Had a balcony overlooking a park. She worked in claims processing at an insurance company downtown, dealing with car accidents and property damage claims. Everything seemed solid. I'm not the jealous type. Never have been. I've always believed that if someone wants to cheat, they're going to do it whether you give them permission or not. I'd rather they just be honest about it, instead of lying to my face. But here's the funny part. The lie eventually came dressed up as some profound test about trust and maturity. One random Tuesday evening, Natalie came home from work looking more serious than usual. She worked standard office hours, 9 to 5, so she usually got home around 6 depending on traffic. That day she walked in around 6:15 and didn't even give me the usual kiss on the cheek. Just set her bag down and asked if we could talk. I was in the kitchen making dinner. Had chicken marinating for fajitas. Figured maybe she wanted to discuss wedding plans, or had some family issue. She told me we needed to talk about something important. Had me turn off the stove and sit down on our couch. She positioned herself across from me in the armchair, sitting forward with her hands clasped like she was about to deliver some kind of corporate presentation. Then she asked me straight up, "Do you trust me?" I didn't even hesitate. Told her yes. I mean, we were engaged, about to get married. Trust was basically the foundation of everything we had. I even went on a little speech about how trust was the most important thing in a relationship, how without trust, you've got nothing. Big mistake on my part. As soon as those words left my mouth, she smiled like she'd just won an argument, like I'd walked right into some trap she'd been setting. "I'm glad to hear you say that," she replied with this tone that should have immediately set off every alarm in my head. "Because I think we're at a stage where we should prove to each other that we trust one another. And I'd like to propose a trust test." Right then, I felt this weird tingling on the back of my neck. That instinct you get when something's about to go sideways. When someone tells you that you need to prove trust, what they're really saying is, "I'm about to do something you won't like, but I want you to accept it with a smile." Still, I let her keep talking. Didn't want to jump to conclusions even though my gut was already screaming at me that this was headed nowhere good. She looked me dead in the eyes with that voice people use when they're trying to manipulate you into compliance and said, "I have to go on a trip with a friend." Just that. Nothing else. No explanation, no context. My response was immediate. No. She looked genuinely surprised, like she didn't expect me to shut it down so fast. Like she'd rehearsed this whole conversation in her head and my script was supposed to be different. But instead of explaining herself properly, she just asked me to listen to her reasoning. Said I was jumping to conclusions without hearing her out. I already knew exactly where this was going, but I stayed seated anyway. Figured I'd at least hear the full pitch before walking out. You said you trust me, she blurted out, almost accusatory, getting defensive already. Well, this is the test. I'm going to be completely honest with you. He's not just any friend. It's Kyle. Kyle, her ex-boyfriend from college. The same Kyle who, according to her own stories, had cheated on her multiple times. The same Kyle she described as emotionally immature and selfish when we first started dating. And now suddenly, he was someone worthy of vacation plans together. I sat there processing that information while she continued her prepared speech. I want you to understand, she said, voice getting that rehearsed quality like she'd practiced this in the mirror, that when you promise something to someone, you should keep it. A long time ago, when I was still with him, I promised we'd take a trip together to this cabin his family owns in Wisconsin. We never got to do it because things ended badly between us. But now the opportunity has come up, and I think it's important to keep my word. It's about integrity. Integrity. She actually used that word with a straight face while asking permission to vacation with her ex-boyfriend. I just stared at her for a good 10 seconds. Don't know if she expected me to stand up and applaud her maturity or give her some kind of award for honesty, but what I did was the complete opposite. Well, then we're done. Her face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, confusion, anger, and then this wounded dignity expression they pull when they're the ones doing something wrong but want you to feel like the bad guy. Don't you trust me, she repeated, like it was some kind of trump card that would automatically make me fold. I did trust you, I told her calmly. Right now, with everything you're saying, you're proving I shouldn't. She frowned and hit me with the classic defense. This has nothing to do with the past. It's a test of maturity. Real adults can maintain friendships with their exes without it being weird or threatening. Yeah, I replied. The maturity to understand that you don't take romantic cabin trips with your ex when you're engaged to someone else. At least not if you respect your relationship or your partner. That's when she lost her composed facade completely. Started saying I was being unreasonable, that I was acting like an insecure teenager, that she thought I was more evolved than this. Said we'd talk about it more when she got back from the trip, and I'd had time to think clearly. There won't be a when you get back, I told her. We're done right now. This conversation is over. She insisted we weren't going to end a 4-year relationship, throw away our entire future, over just a little weekend trip with an old friend. I repeated the same thing. We're done. She got up from the armchair, clearly annoyed, and said she wasn't going to keep arguing in circles, that we'd discuss it more calmly after she returned, and I'd stopped being emotional about it. I told her there was nothing left to discuss. Everything was already perfectly clear, but she kept refusing to accept it. She said she hadn't broken up with me, that we would talk more after the trip when I'd had time to cool down and think rationally about how I was overreacting. The trip was scheduled for 2 days later. Some long weekend thing. Since we lived together, I'm guessing she didn't want to face me again before leaving, so she packed a bag and went to stay at her friend Jessica's place. Said she needed space from my negativity. As for me, I'm not going to lie. It hurt. 4 years together, engagement ring, wedding plans, joint savings account, families that loved each other. All of it gone because she wanted to play house with her cheating ex-boyfriend and expected me to smile about it. But it also made crystal clear that there was nothing left to save. She'd already made her choice. I used those 2 days productively, took time off work, and packed everything that belonged to me. Put my clothes in boxes, grabbed my tools from the storage closet, collected my books and paperwork and kitchen stuff I'd brought from my old place, gathered the furniture I'd contributed, my recliner, the coffee table I'd built myself, the TV I'd bought before we moved in together. Called my buddy from work who had a truck, and he helped me load everything up. My parents lived about 40 minutes away but had space in their garage for my stuff temporarily. Spent those 2 days moving out completely. Left her furniture, her dishes, her decorations. Took only what was mine. I wasn't going to wait around for her to come back from her romantic getaway and find me at home like some kind of doormat willing to negotiate. Before leaving, I called my parents and told them the engagement was off. They were shocked, obviously. My mom asked if I was sure, if I should wait and think about it more carefully before making such a big decision. But once I explained the whole trust test with her ex-boyfriend situation, they understood completely. My dad actually said he was proud I didn't let myself get walked over. Said too many guys would have rolled over and accepted it out of fear of being alone. Found a decent 1-bedroom apartment across town within those 2 days. Nothing fancy, but it had a garage space for my truck and didn't share any walls with Natalie's side of the city. Signed a 6-month lease. Figured I'd reassess after that. Now here's the really interesting part that confirmed everything. When I was gathering my bathroom stuff, I opened the drawer where she kept all her makeup and skincare products to grab the first aid kit I'd stored there months ago. And among all those expensive lotions and serums she was always buying, guess what I found? Her engagement ring. The one I'd given her 7 months ago. The one that had cost me 3 months of saving. She had it stored in that drawer like it was any other random piece of jewelry. Not in a ring box. Not somewhere safe or meaningful. Just tossed in there with lip balm and bobby pins. She hadn't even taken it with her when she left for Jessica's place. I don't know how long it had been since she'd actually worn the thing, but that detail confirmed what I already knew deep down. She'd already made her decision long before telling me about the trip. What she told me wasn't a discussion or a request, or even really asking permission. It was a formality, an announcement. She'd already decided she was going. She just wanted me to accept it without protest so she could feel better about herself. Obviously, I kept the ring. Figured I could pawn it later and get at least some of my money back. When Natalie went on her trip that Friday, I thought I'd finally get a few days of peace to process everything and settle into my new place. I'd only blocked her number on my phone, which turned out to be a mistake, because a few hours into her trip, she started messaging me on Instagram. First message came through around 8 p.m. So you blocked my number. Real mature behavior from someone who claims to want to work things out. Then a few minutes later, well, I'm letting you know we arrived safely. We're in separate bedrooms in the cabin. Don't worry. Trust me. She included a photo of what looked like a rustic cabin interior. Generic shot of a fireplace and some pine furniture. One of those pictures they send to make everything seem innocent and normal. Probably thought it would reassure me or something. As soon as I saw it, I just shook my head. Didn't respond. Just went to her Instagram profile and blocked her there too. I wasn't going to waste energy on someone actively trying to paint me as the jealous, controlling guy in her little narrative while she was literally on a romantic getaway with her ex. At that point, she still didn't know I'd completely moved out of our apartment, but she was about to find out. 2 days after she got back from her trip, she showed up at my new apartment building. I still don't know which one of our mutual friends gave her my address, but someone clearly couldn't keep their mouth shut. She knocked on my door repeatedly around 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from work, was making dinner. Finally answered after the 5th round of knocking. She told me she'd gone to our old apartment when she got back, found it completely empty except for her stuff, and gotten scared thinking something terrible had happened to me. That maybe I'd been in an accident or something. Real convincing performance. Then her tone shifted completely. Got all condescending and parental. Said what I was doing was childish and extreme. That I needed to calm down and stop acting like a spoiled kid throwing a tantrum because he didn't get his way. I repeated exactly what I'd told her before she left for her trip. We were over, there was nothing to discuss, and she needed to leave. But she kept pushing. Actually put her foot in the door when I tried to close it. Like she physically wasn't going to let me end the conversation on my terms. I told her to remove her foot and leave my property. She just laughed like I was being dramatic. Said I was going to regret this when I calmed down and realized what I was throwing away. A few minutes later, when I still wouldn't let her inside to talk things through, she started raising her voice from outside my door. Not quite yelling, but loud enough that neighbors could definitely hear. She was going on about how nothing happened on the trip, and we stayed in separate rooms the entire time. And Kyle is actually a really mature guy now who respects our relationship. That last part made me actually laugh out loud through the closed door. The ex who'd cheated on her repeatedly was now a mature, respectful guy. The irony was incredible. I called building security to have her removed. Several neighbors had already poked their heads out into the hallway to see what the commotion was about, and I didn't want to end up as some viral video about crazy exes showing up at apartments. Security showed up within 5 minutes and asked her to leave the property. She kept talking as they escorted her toward the elevator, saying she wasn't giving up on us, that this was all just a big misunderstanding, that I'd see reason eventually when my pride stopped clouding my judgment. Over the next couple weeks, she showed up several more times. Would stand outside my building around the time I usually got home from work. Wait near my truck in the parking lot. One time building security called me to say she'd been sitting in the lobby for 2 hours. Started sending messages through mutual friends too. Jessica sent me a long text about how Natalie was really struggling and just wanted a chance to explain. That I should at least hear her out. That relationships require forgiveness and communication. One time she actually left a handwritten note at my building's front desk. The security guard handed it to me looking uncomfortable. Note said something about not destroying what we'd built together over a simple trip, and please just talk to me like an adult. I threw it away without reading the whole thing. Then I got a text from an unknown number. Obviously her using some app or a friend's phone. Said if I kept ignoring her, she was going to go talk to my mother. Try to get my family involved to pressure me into reconciling. Didn't surprise me at all. I know exactly how she operates. She probably figured if my mom got involved and started pushing me to work things out, I'd cave under family pressure. I replied to the unknown number with just 4 words. Go ahead, talk to her. And she actually did it. What Natalie didn't expect was that my mother already knew the entire story. As soon as I'd told my mom about the whole trust test trip with the ex-boyfriend situation, she immediately understood exactly what kind of person Natalie really was. My mom's been married to my dad for 32 years. She knows what real commitment looks like. So when Natalie showed up at my parents' house that Saturday afternoon, she wasn't greeted with sympathy or support or mediation services. My mom isn't the type to yell or make scenes, but she's got that kind of quiet, authoritative presence where you just know not to test her boundaries. Taught elementary school for 20 years before retiring. Can shut down nonsense with just a look. Natalie arrived with her whole rehearsed speech prepared. My dad answered the door and my mom came to see what was happening. Natalie started in immediately about how it was all just a misunderstanding, how nothing physical happened on the trip, how I was overreacting and being immature, how it was just a harmless weekend catching up with an old friend, how she needed someone to talk sense into me and make me see reason. My mother let her finish her entire speech without interrupting, just stood there listening with her arms crossed. Then, calmly told Natalie she already knew everything, that I'd explained the situation, that there was nothing to justify. Natalie tried pivoting to playing the victim, said I was being impulsive, that I wouldn't listen to her side of things, that I was acting out of wounded pride instead of love and understanding, that she'd thought my family would be more supportive of our relationship. But my mom doesn't have much patience for manipulation tactics. Seen too many parents try to excuse their kids' bad behavior over the years. She told Natalie straight up that if she wanted respect in a relationship, she should have shown it before going on vacation with an ex-boyfriend while wearing another man's engagement ring. Natalie was actually speechless for a moment. You could see her trying to process that this wasn't going according to plan, that my mom wasn't going to be the ally she'd expected. She tried redirecting the conversation, saying she didn't want to cause family drama and just wanted a chance to talk to me face to face. To explain things properly, my mother cut her off and asked her to leave the property. But Natalie kept pushing, said it was unfair that everyone was against her, that she'd only wanted to keep an old promise she'd made years ago, that it didn't mean anything romantic, that she needed help making me understand that. That's when my mom's patience officially ran out. She didn't yell or curse at her, but she made it crystal clear that Natalie wasn't welcome and needed to leave immediately before my dad physically removed her. When Natalie still stood there trying to argue her point, my mom actually went inside, grabbed a broom from the kitchen, came back out and started sweeping toward her like she was shooing away a stray cat. My dad said it was the most aggressive sweeping he'd ever witnessed. Natalie backed down the driveway while my mom just kept advancing with the broom, not saying a word. Sadly, I wasn't there to see it myself, but my dad called me about 20 minutes later and gave me the entire play-by-play. Said he hadn't seen my mom that fired up since someone tried to return a clearly used item at her garage sale and got aggressive about it. That was the last time Natalie tried contacting me directly. After my mother literally swept her off the property, she stopped showing up places. No more messages, no more calls, no more attempts at contact through friends. I figured she'd finally understood that her little trust test game was over, and she had nobody left to manipulate into supporting her. My peace and quiet didn't last too long, though. Almost a month after everything had calmed down and I'd settled into my routine at the new place, Natalie showed up at my door again. It was a Thursday evening around 6:30. I'd just gotten home from work, hadn't even changed out of my work clothes yet. I wasn't expecting her, had no reason to see her, and absolutely zero desire to hear whatever she had to say. But when someone like her decides they still have a card to play, they show up regardless of whether you want them to or not. She asked if we could talk for just a moment, said it was important. I told her through the door that I had nothing to discuss with her, and she needed to leave. She insisted, saying she only needed a few minutes and didn't want to cause a scene in front of my building again. Said it would be better if we talked inside privately. Against my better judgment, and probably because I was tired from work and just wanted her gone, I let her in. Figured I'd hear whatever desperate pitch she had prepared and then kick her out. She came inside, sat down on my couch without being invited, and went quiet for a few seconds. Looked nervous, but not the guilty kind of nervous. More like someone preparing to make a calculated move, like she was gathering courage for something. Then she took a deep breath and dropped it on me. I'm pregnant. Said it completely straight. No buildup, no emotion, no explanation. Just flat delivery like she was announcing the weather. I stayed completely still in my armchair across from her, waiting to see what the angle was here. Didn't take long to find out. And it's yours, she added with this almost rehearsed tone, like she'd practiced saying it in the mirror. You need to think about the baby now. We can't keep fighting over something that doesn't even matter anymore. This is bigger than both of us. This is a time to come together, not stay divided. I looked at her without saying anything. Apparently, she took my silence as an opening to keep building her case. You should move back in with me, she continued, voice getting that pleading quality. We can get married as soon as possible so the baby will have a stable home with both parents. I don't want our child growing up in the middle of conflict and resentment. We can work past all this other stuff for the sake of our baby. I had to actually stop myself from laughing. The whole thing was completely absurd. The timeline, the timing, the sudden convenient pregnancy, right when she realized I actually meant it about being done. I reminded her calmly that we'd broken up before her trip to Wisconsin, that immediately after spending several days in a cabin with her ex-boyfriend, she now conveniently happened to be pregnant. Told her it was way too suspicious to just ignore and accept at face value. Don't start with your paranoia and accusations, she shot back, getting defensive immediately. Nothing happened on that trip. You and I were always careful when we were together, but protection fails sometimes. It's something that happens. Methods aren't 100% effective. Yeah, I said calmly. It also happens that the father could be someone else entirely. Her expression changed immediately. That fake confidence she'd been wearing just evaporated. She looked at me like I'd just committed the worst offense imaginable, like I'd insulted her entire character. Are you seriously saying I cheated on you? She asked, trying to sound outraged and wounded. I'm not saying it as an accusation, I answered. I'm stating it as a statistical probability. And to be absolutely certain before I take on any responsibility, I'm going to need a paternity test done. She crossed her arms and let out this heavy sigh like I was a child who needed to be educated about how the real world works, about trust and relationships and taking people at their word. Seriously? She said, voice dripping with condescension. I can't believe you distrust me like this. You were different before all this. You used to trust me without question. Before, you didn't ask me to trust you while planning secret romantic getaways with your cheating ex-boyfriend, I reminded her. If you really want me to take responsibility for this child, I will. But only after a test proves that baby is actually biologically mine. And just so we're completely clear right now, I'm not getting back together with you or marrying you regardless of the results. What if I refuse to do the test? She asked, getting defiant now, testing to see if I'd back down. Then there's nothing more to talk about, I replied simply. I'm not taking legal or financial responsibility for a child I don't know is mine. You can leave now. She stood up abruptly, slamming her hand down on my coffee table hard enough to make my remote control jump. You're a coward. You're abandoning me at literally the worst moment of my life. After everything we've been through together, after 4 years, I'm just asking you to trust me one time. Just once. That sentence actually made me smile despite the situation. Trust me. The exact same phrase she'd used to justify her trip with Kyle. Same manipulation tactic, just wrapped in pregnancy drama this time. No, I told her. You need to leave my apartment now. She grabbed her purse and left in a fury. Said I was going to regret this decision. That I'd chosen to do things the hard way when we could have handled it maturely. That she'd make sure I took responsibility whether I wanted to or not. I didn't respond to any of it. Just closed the door behind her and stood there for a moment, trying to process everything that had just happened. Her behavior didn't surprise me anymore at this point, but it definitely exhausted me mentally. She always had to turn everything into manipulation or high drama. Could never just be straightforward and honest. A week passed without hearing from her. Not that I minded the silence, but knowing her personality, she was probably plotting her next move, planning how to escalate things. As a precaution, I found a family law attorney and scheduled a consultation. Explained the entire situation, the trip, the breakup, the suspicious pregnancy timing. He listened, took notes, asked questions about our relationship timeline. He explained what could happen if she pursued this legally, told me not to worry at this stage, said to save all messages between us, keep records of when we broke up, document everything. He also said I did the right thing demanding a paternity test, that too many men get trapped into supporting children that aren't theirs because they're afraid to ask for proof. So there I was, just waiting to see what she'd come up with next. Had no direct news from her, but knowing her patterns, I was certain she wasn't going to stay quiet for long. The only thing I was absolutely certain about was that I wasn't letting myself get manipulated again. Not by her, not by anyone. I'd set my boundary, and I was sticking to it. Update 1. Thanks to everyone who commented on my first post and sent messages of support. I read through most of them, and honestly, it doesn't even surprise me anymore that so many of you have dealt with the same trust test garbage from partners. Seems like it's become this universal excuse people use to justify betrayal while making you feel bad for having boundaries. But anyway, getting to the actual update. It's been almost a year and a half since everything I talked about in my original post. And yeah, there have been some major developments worth sharing. Couple months ago, I got officially served with legal papers at my apartment. Natalie had filed a formal lawsuit claiming I needed to take financial responsibility for the baby. That, according to her sworn testimony, was definitely mine. Wasn't surprised at all when I opened that envelope. Saw it coming from the day she left my apartment screaming about making me take responsibility the hard way, whether I liked it or not. So I showed up to court on the scheduled date with my lawyer, the same guy I'd consulted with over a year ago. He'd prepared all our documentation, had everything organized in folders with tabs and highlighted sections. When I first saw Natalie in the courtroom waiting area, something immediately stood out to me. She looked genuinely nervous. Didn't have that same confidence and superiority she used to carry when she thought she was in control of situations. She was holding the baby in her arms. Kid looked maybe 8 or 9 months old at that point. And despite everything that had happened, despite all the manipulation and lies, I felt a little bad for the child. Not for her, but for this baby who didn't ask to be born into whatever mess this was. The judge called the hearing to order and started things directly. Asked Natalie if she maintained her legal claim that I was the biological father of her child. She said yes without hesitation, then launched into this whole rehearsed speech about how I was definitely the father, how I'd refused to help her or even talk to her, how I'd completely disappeared from her life and abandoned her at the most difficult time anyone could go through. Perfect victim performance. You could tell she'd practiced it. The judge gave me an opportunity to respond. I explained the entire situation as clearly and factually as possible. The trip with the ex-boyfriend, the trust test justification, the breakup before she left, the suspicious timing of the pregnancy announcement. Everything laid out with specific dates and details, backed up by the text messages and Instagram messages I'd saved. When I finished my explanation, the judge was quiet for a moment, looking at his notes. Then, he simply ordered a DNA paternity test to be conducted. The look on Natalie's face when she heard that was absolutely priceless. As soon as the words DNA test came out of the judge's mouth, her whole expression just crumbled. She tried hiding the reaction, but the fear was completely obvious to anyone paying attention. I don't know who might have been advising her or what she'd been told, but she clearly hoped the case wouldn't reach that point. Probably thought the lawsuit itself would intimidate me enough that I'd accept responsibility without demanding scientific proof. Her lawyer tried arguing that the test wasn't actually necessary, that she had sufficient circumstantial evidence based on the timeline of their relationship and when the child was conceived. That making her undergo testing was unnecessarily invasive and traumatic. But the judge shut that down immediately and firmly. Assumptions and timelines are not legal evidence in paternity cases, the judge said in this completely flat, no-nonsense tone. We resolve these matters with scientific proof, not speculation. The test will be conducted. No more discussion after that. We were both ordered to appear for DNA testing at an approved laboratory. Date was set for the following week right there in the courtroom. The day we went to the lab for the actual test, Natalie barely looked in my direction. She was carrying the baby and trying to act calm and composed, but you could see her hands shaking when she signed the paperwork. See the nervous energy radiating off her. I signed the consent forms, did what the lab technician asked of me, provided my sample, and left without saying a single word to her. Didn't see the point in any communication. Few weeks passed before the official results came back, and we were summoned back to court. I went with my lawyer to receive them. Natalie was already there when we arrived, sitting with her lawyer looking pale. As soon as she saw me walk into the courtroom, she tried avoiding eye contact completely, just stared down at her hands folded in her lap. The judge opened the sealed envelope containing the results in front of both parties, read silently for a few seconds, expression completely neutral, then said in a dry, matter-of-fact tone, "The DNA test result is negative. There is no biological connection between the defendant and the minor child. Paternity is conclusively disproven." Natalie completely froze in her seat, didn't say a single word, didn't even try to act surprised or confused or claim some kind of error. Her face said absolutely everything. She just lowered her head, pulled the baby closer to her chest, and stared at the floor like she wanted it to open up and swallow her. The judge concluded the hearing and dismissed us. It was exactly what I'd known from the beginning, but at least now it was official. In writing, my lawyer pulled me aside in the hallway afterward and strongly advised me not to just let this situation go without consequences. Said these types of false paternity accusations leave a permanent mark on someone's reputation even when proven wrong. That I should set a legal precedent so she'd think twice before trying this with someone else. Made sense to me. So we filed a countersuit. Defamation of character, reimbursement for legal fees, and compensation for damage to my reputation and the emotional distress of being falsely accused. Natalie had to learn that lying and manipulating people actually have real consequences in the adult world. The legal process for the countersuit took several more months to work through the system. Depositions, paperwork, more court dates. When the final judgment came through, the court ruled in my favor. Judge ordered Natalie to cover all court costs from both cases and pay a fine for making false claims under sworn testimony. Nothing that made me rich by any means, but enough that it would sting financially. More importantly, it was officially on the public record that she'd attempted to fraudulently claim I was the father of a child that wasn't biologically mine. I'm not going to lie, I genuinely felt bad for that baby. Kid's not at fault for any of this adult drama, but I'm completely certain the real biological father is Kyle, her ex-boyfriend, the one she took that innocent trust test trip with. Funny thing is, I recently heard through mutual friends we still have that Kyle apparently left the country entirely. According to what several people told me, as soon as he found out about the pregnancy situation, he just vanished. Quit his job, broke his apartment lease, and disappeared without leaving a forwarding address. Several people have told me I should try getting some kind of revenge on him if I ever get the chance. Make sure he faces consequences too. Maybe I would consider it if he were actually within reach and I knew how to find him. But honestly, I don't even know the guy directly. Never met him. And since he fled to another country apparently, there's no realistic way to do anything about it. Plus, taking on that much effort and trouble for a woman who's not worth my time or energy just seems completely pointless at this stage. Life will teach her the lessons she needs eventually. I trust that karma works itself out. From what I understand through the social circle grapevine, Natalie's desperately trying to track Kyle down, chasing legal options to force him to take responsibility, but she's having absolutely zero luck with any of it. Guy's apparently gone completely off the grid. Meanwhile, the baby ended up in the primary care of her parents. Apparently, they're the ones actually raising the child day to day because Natalie can't find stable employment and can't financially support a baby on her own. She's been working random temp jobs and part-time retail, according to what I've heard, living back in her childhood bedroom. Complete reversal from the independent adult life she had before. Her parents, by the way, said absolutely nothing to me during this entire legal process. Not an apology for their daughter's behavior. Not an explanation. Not even an acknowledgement of what happened. They just completely disappeared from the situation like none of it ever occurred. I'm guessing the embarrassment was too overwhelming. Easier to just pretend their daughter didn't try to legally trap someone into raising another man's baby through false accusations. And to answer something that a lot of people asked about in the comments of my first post, yes, the engagement ring. She never asked for it back. Never even mentioned it existed. So after the first court case concluded and I knew for certain I was in the clear, I sold it. Wasn't a fortune by any means, but it covered a decent portion of my legal fees from both cases. Also used some of the money to upgrade my truck. New tires, brake job, full detail. Felt pretty good turning that symbol of broken promises into something actually useful and practical. Several months have now passed since the final trial concluded. Haven't heard anything from Natalie since. Not a single message or attempt at contact. Not interested in hearing from her either. I assume she's still living with her parents, trying to piece her life back together somehow. Maybe looking for the next person she can convince with her speeches about trust and maturity and keeping promises to ex-boyfriends. As for me, I'm genuinely doing better than I've been in years. Got a solid promotion at work about 6 months ago that came with a significant salary increase and better benefits. Put me in charge of an entire regional distribution network. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.